Well, however you're watching or listening, we've got a show for you tonight because it's hard to keep up with the news as it develops. Increasing levels, new dimensions of absurdity, of atrocity are being reached across the world. Let me start with the absurdity inside the British Labour Party. Somebody called Rebecca Long-Bailey that nobody outside of Britain will ever have heard of, and hardly anyone in Britain has ever heard of. She was the left-wing Corbyn supporting candidate, although supporting him as the rope supports the hanging man by the end. She was, if you like, the continuity Corbyn candidate just 3 or 4 months ago against the Blairite candidate, Sir Keir Starmer, the British state's former chief prosecutor. What could possibly go wrong? Anyway, she was heavily defeated, but given a consolation prize, a low-profile portfolio, they thought, as the shadow education secretary. Certainly, they didn't allow her to talk much about education, not least because she, supported by the teaching trade unions, thought that rushing our children back to school in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic was a bad idea, so they sent out other Blairite lieutenants to talk about schools more often than she was able to be. But then, unwisely, she retweeted an article from the Independent newspaper that's owned by the former KGB resident in London, whom I knew well. Know what I'm saying? He now owns the Independent newspaper, and they published a splendid article by an actress called Maxine Peake, a bit of an icon, actually, in left-wing politics in Britain, in which, en passant, she mentioned that many US police departments were learning their brutal tactics in Israel, where they were going, I'm not making this up, American cops going to Israel for training in how to subdue a recalcitrant and, dare I say, occupied population. Now, this all had the benefit of being indisputably true. In fact, the Minneapolis Police Department boasted on their website about the training they had received in Israel. The Virtual Jewish Library has given extensive coverage to this new practice of many US police forces obtaining training in Israel. It is a matter of public record in Israel, in the Journal of Public Record in Israel, Haaretz, on umpteen occasions. And this was mentioned by Maxine Peake in her article, which the Independent published. And this was retweeted by Rebecca Long-Bailey, more, I think, as a tribute to her distinguished constituent, Maxine Peake. And within hours, she was sacked by Sir Keir Starmer from the Labour front bench. Does that constitute a purge? Without a doubt, because she was the last Corbynite standing on the Labour front bench in the shadow cabinet. And so, in just a few months, Labour has gone from having a Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell leadership, a Corbyn-McDonnell-dominated national executive, a front bench dominated by Corbyn and McDonnell, in just 3 months, to the complete opposite. Blairism is back, just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water. However, this poses a major problem now for Keir Starmer. First of all, because he defined what Maxine Peake said in this article, which, by the way, the Independent, having published it, then congratulated Starmer for sacking someone for retweeting their article. So much for the Western media, about which more later, I promise you. But the problem for Starmer is that the conflation of criticism of the Israeli police force with Judaism as anti-Semitism is itself anti-Semitic. And someone has now tabled an official complaint in the Labour Party's complaints procedure accusing Keir Starmer of anti-Semitism. This one will run and run. The second problem is that Mr. Netanyahu is next week, this week, going to rip up 50 years of international law, rip up the Oslo Agreement, rip up the absurdly named peace process, and officially confiscate, bring into Israel the land that Israel has occupied on the west bank of the River Jordan ever since 1967. 53 years, a long time in anybody's lifetime. And so Labour members are now in a situation where they will be forced to remain silent about this atrocity that Mr. Netanyahu intends to pursue against the wishes of every government in the whole world except the government of Donald J. Trump and Jared Kushner. And so I'm asking in this poll, number one, is the Labour Party engaged in a purge? A, yes. B, no. You can vote now on my Twitter page. But it is a purge, and it is an invitation to self-censorship. The arrow that flies in the night. You don't see it, but it reaches its target nonetheless. Labour members are now living under a reign of intellectual terror on the subject of Israel-Palestine. And how many of them are going to be purged if they step out of line? How many of them, my experience this week, rather a lot, are going to rip up their Labour Party cards rather than wait to be picked off one by one? So that's one of the subjects that we'll be dealing with this evening. Of course, the coronavirus crisis continues apace in Britain. An average of 140 people die every day of the coronavirus. If 140 people died every day from a terrorist attack, well, it would be the biggest story in the country, but it isn't here because our government has declared effectively that the crisis is over. Except that it isn't. The first wave isn't. Less than 10% of our people have caught the coronavirus yet, and 65,000 of us have died as a result. Do the maths. When 20% of us have got it, if 50% of us get it, and the death rates rise exponentially, well, we are in the mother of all public health crises. But you wouldn't think it. There's a march going on in central London right now for black trans rights, I think it says, though there are virtually no black people on it, and I didn't see that many trans people, none that stood out anyway, but thousands of people in close proximity with no social distancing are out demonstrating in Britain again today. And 500,000 people, reportedly, crammed onto the beach at Bournemouth in the week on the hottest day of the year. I've no idea where they went to the toilet, but 500,000 people is a lot of coronavirus and a lot of litter and trash. So we'll be talking about what's next on the coronavirus with Ranjit Brar, doctor, physician, surgeon, as always, in the third hour of the mother of all talk shows this evening. It's still rampant in the United States. In one state after another this week, figures of increases of hundreds of % of cases is being reported. I work every night on RT America, and just before I come on, I hear the roundup. Texas, Florida, all kinds of places. Trump territory, by the way, is suffering vaulting increases in the number of people with coronavirus. But still, Trump pushes on. The heat didn't do what he said it would do. The drugs that he's punted didn't do what he said they would do. But actually now, the coronavirus may be the least of his problems. That and the collapsing economy in the United States is definitely placing a gigantic question mark now on his ability to be re-elected in November. The only saving grace for Donald Trump is that the man the Democrats have put up against him is a man that isn't fit to be let out alone and isn't allowed out alone. In fact, he isn't allowed out at all. He, presumably scripted, delivers homilies into a camera in his basement, in his house in Delaware. Now, if he can get all the way to the election that way, he might have a chance of doing it. He hasn't had a press conference since he was chosen as the presumptive candidate for the Democratic Party. If he ever does have to face the press, and when he has to face the hundreds of millions of dollars of attack ads which the Trump camp are going to launch at him, he may crumble under the pressure. We'll see. But in any case, a new front opened up this weekend, and I have to deal with it in the next few minutes. After what seems like months of China being public enemy number one, suddenly it's back to Russia. According to the New York Times, confirmed by the Washington Post and the other major newspapers in the United States, the Taliban have been taking the ruble from President Putin as payment for, bounty for, the killing of occupation troops. No scintilla of evidence is offered. The stories are based entirely on briefings from inside the US intelligence community, with each newspaper speaking presumably to the same spooks and plastering it over their front page. And now, when I looked earlier before the show, the charge of treason is being leveled again at President Donald Trump, because they say he knew that this was being done and said and did nothing about it. Now, there are a number of problems with this story. The first one is anybody who thinks the Taliban need Russian money to fire shots at American occupiers hasn't been paying attention to the history over the last nearly 40 years of Afghan history. They really know nothing about it. You see, the Afghan people have been fighting foreign armies on their soil since 1980. And before that, centuries before that, were fighting every foreign army that arrived in their country, from Alexander the Great all the way to George W. Bush, not so great. They didn't require foreign funding to do so. It's stretching it a bit that they would require foreign funding to do it now. But that's not the only problem with the hypothesis. A bigger problem is that the Taliban are not killing American or British soldiers at all. There's a ceasefire. There's a peace process. The Taliban are fighting the puppet Afghan government forces, not the foreign forces. Although the foreign forces are still fighting them from the sky. A third problem, and the biggest of all, is this. There was a foreign funder of the Islamist fanatics in Afghanistan, but it was not Russia. In fact, the Russians were the victims of it. It was the United States of America. I've just watched 2 brilliant interviews given by Hillary Clinton, no less, in which she describes in great detail how the United States poured money, materiel, men, propaganda into building up the Islamist monster in Afghanistan with the precise purpose of killing Russians. So this story turns on its absolute head, actually reverses the actual reality, which is that the people who paid the Taliban, the people who paid Al-Qaeda, the people who paid ISIS, the people who paid every one of the alphabet soup of Islamist extremist organizations over the last decades was not Russia, which was actually fighting them on the battlefield in Syria, while we were their air force and their chief propagandists. This Islamist monster is the creation of not Russia, but the United States itself. So much for governments and politicians, liars, almost every one. But what does it say about the Western media? Every single one of which, across the entire Western world, has repeated this baseless, fact-free, idiotic charge against Russia today on their front pages and on their news bulletins. What it says is, we don't have a free media at all. We have a collection of hired hirelings whose job is to be the stenographer of the power in the country in which they are operating, which is the exact obverse of what journalism is supposed to do and be, which might explain why Julian Assange continues to languish in Britain's Guantanamo Bay at Belmarsh Prison in South London. This is the mother of all talk shows. There's much more of this over the next 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is the mother of all talk shows.